Welcome to Harmony Talk, a podcast about dreamers and doers from every walk of life. We talk to artists, entrepreneurs, inventors, authors, dancers, sports figures, and people committed to social change. About the drive, the passion they had to have, the obstacles they had to overcome to achieve their goals. Our guests live their dreams, turn their visions into reality, and they share their inspiring stories with us. Our guest today is Bob Eckstein, an award-winning writer, illustrator, and cartoonist for such publications as The New Yorker magazine, The New York Times, Reader's Digest, and the Smithsonian. Bob's 2016 book, Footnotes from the World's Greatest Bookstores, was a New York Times bestseller. Bob has actually produced many books, including 2 on the history of, drumroll, the snowman, and another about cat names. Yes, cat names. Bob says he doesn't have a cat, but he loves all things cat. Bob's latest endeavor is the beautifully penned and illustrated Footnotes from the Most Fascinating Museums, stories and memorable moments from people who love museums, a compendium of more than 70 museums, all of them in North America, most in the United States. The book richly and very concisely details each museum's collection with highlighted quotes from visitors and curators. Bob joins us from New York City, where he lives and teaches writing and drawing at New York University. Bob also has a vacation home in Northeast Pennsylvania. This podcast is brought to you by A.M. Skyer, a third-generation family insurance business started in 1920. I'm your host, Lisa Champeau. Welcome, Bob Eckstein, to Harmony Talk. So great to have you on our podcast.
Oh, Lisa, thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, but we're going to start with the museum book printed by Princeton Architectural Press with Steve Martin, the comedian, the actor, called it a joyous book. What prompted you to delve into museums?
Well, it was during the pandemic that I was thinking about what is the best use of my time, what I could do to help, what I could do to have fun. And I was seeing that museums were actually being a little bit neglected, like a lot of things. They were having a downtime. And they were struggling as a result of people not wanting to go out. And then on top of it, I love artwork. The idea of going to different museums was so exciting to me and so appealing. And I just thought, my goodness, this could be a dream job. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. I had so much fun going to all the different museums and then going home, being so inspired, seeing such great artwork and seeing what people accomplished. And I learned so much on the way. It was just such a great book to work on.
Well, let's talk for a second about all that great artwork. I mean, you divide it into categories: culture, academia, planes, trains, automobiles. And there's a wide range. I mean, there's the Metropolitan Museum of Art, there's the Art Institute, and then you have things like the Spam Museum, the Hollywood Car Museum, which is actually in Las Vegas. How did you choose the museums?
Well, the point of the book, too, is to be user-friendly. I wanted people to feel like there was something there for everyone and not just for people who love art. And that's what we have in the book, the Museum of Bad Art. I try to show that out there was this thing we kind of took for granted, that was all these institutions and different areas of expertise that you can enjoy. And I myself went to museums I didn't think I was going to enjoy, and I walked out loving the place. And another thing I kept in mind, too, is how family-friendly it all was, because I understand the struggles with people finding something to do. Like, for instance, if you're going to a ball game right now and you want to go to a Yankee game, you're going to spend hundreds of dollars. So I wanted to show that you could bring your family to a museum and there would be something for the little kids. There would be something for people who, let's say, love cars or love ships or whatever it may be. So I kept that in mind in choosing which museums would be finally making it in my book. The list I narrowed down to about 150. And from that, I picked out the ones that met the criteria of historical reference, beauty, museums that did outreach for the community, that played a role in helping people be more aware of their heritage and their history. So there was a lot of factors that it came down to, including which museums had the most exciting stories that would inspire people to go visit that museum.
You certainly do have a lot of quotes. I mean, just for a second, I'd like to talk about the museum that you found the most compelling, which is the Museum of Jurassic Technology, which includes, among other items, quote, folk remedies, such as eating dead mice on toast for bedwetting. What is the story behind that museum?
If you ask me a different day, I would have a different favorite museum. There were so many favorite museums, and certainly this was one of them many days. And when I went there, it was quite by accident that I found this museum. It really wasn't on my initial 150 museums, but I had an opportunity to visit this museum. And I don't want to spoil it for people except to say it's the Andy Kaufman of museums.
It's pretty hard to describe, actually.
It's hard to describe without rooting the joke or rooting the trick. It is something that's a unique experience, and everyone who goes to this museum is going to come away with a different experience from their visit, which is exactly what I think museums should do for everyone. Everyone's visit is going to be a very personal engagement with that place. They're going to have their own memories they bring to it and how they see this museum in their life, because museums are just these giant selfies. It's a documentation of everything we've accomplished on this planet put together. And then where's your place in this planet? When you walk in, it's going to mean different things. Yesterday, I went to 3 museums.
Oh, you're still going to museums?
I'm still going. I went from not even really being that into museums as a child to now not getting enough museums. And yesterday, I went to 3. My first museum I fell in love with, the American Museum of Natural History.
Oh, that's a great museum, yeah.
It's a great museum. I had to go back to the places that meant so much to me. There's like moments where I go to, let's say, the Snow Fox, which is a diorama where you see a window that's pitch black just about until you adjust your eyesight. And then you see the foxes in midair flying at you. And what's great about it as a kid, you could wave your arms and stuff. You're not going to be attacked. And I'm watching kids in front of me taking their selfies. And I'm thinking, that was me. I was going to say 40 years ago. I'll say 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Give myself a break here. And I remember the moment, that excitement of seeing something you'd never seen before. You're taken to a place you've never been to. And I was in the Alps and I'm watching goats, taxidermy goats up in the Alps, and different places that I only heard of as a kid.
And the exhibits, some of them are permanent, of course, but they also change, which is another reason to continue to go.
Exactly. That's the appeal of museums today, too, is they're always evolving. And so I tell people, you got to go back because it's not the same museum. They've upgraded. They have state-of-the-art technology. They have things now to have you go face-to-face with things. That museum, for instance, you can go into a section they have set up with live butterflies, millions of butterflies in which you walk with them in this environment. It's not for everyone.
Right.
It scares the bejeebers out of me to be surrounded by 1,000 insects. But,
Some people find it exciting.
We don't have to let everyone know that I'm a little bit of a fraidy cat. But that's the point, that it's a different experience for different people. And I can't think of any museums I regretted going to. Every time I went to a museum, I walked away learning something new.
You're talking about museums, but you certainly have a lot of quotes in your museum book from other people. And they're wonderful quotes. I love the one from Bill Murray, who said that after he walked out of some kind of a stand-up comic show, he felt very down, like he had failed. But he went to a museum and he saw a painting of a woman with a scythe in a field at sunrise. And he said, look, she can face the new day. Every day I get a chance to start all over again with a new sunrise. I thought that was a great quote. And you have wonderful quotes.
Yeah, it's the power of art. We sometimes take for granted. It's also an acquired understanding. It doesn't happen immediately. You have to open yourself up to the fact that art can move you that way. Now, yesterday, one of the other museums I went to was the Met. And I had a real interesting moment there. I had a very proud moment as they asked me to sign copies of my book, and to see my book on display right when you walk into this grand gift shop in itself is really great. But there was this other moment I had that was more moving, and that is I came across a painting that I had not seen before. The name of the painting is called Before Dinner. The painter was Pierre Bernard, and this painting just stopped me in my tracks. I took a picture of it, and I've been talking about it since. It moved me so much that it, again, like recharged my batteries as an artist. And it's an example that was similar to Bill Murray, where it changes you. In his case, it prevented him from committing suicide.
That's profound.
Yeah. And in my case, it's going to be a small step in my growth as someone who's trying to constantly improve as an artist and constantly see if I could take my work to a level that's higher and reaches more people and touches more people.
You're listening to an interview with Bob Eckstein, a cartoonist, writer, and illustrator with many publications to his credit. His books include The History of the Snowman, Parts 1 and 2, The Complete Book of Cat Names, Footnotes from the World's Greatest Bookstores, and his latest, Footnotes from the Most Fascinating Museums, stories and memorable moments from people who love museums. Bob, whose cartoons are always signed Bob in lowercase, loves what he does. He has a true passion or calling for his art. For the museum book, he had to travel a lot. His books include museums in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, from the well-known, such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, to what may be less familiar, the Aftel Archive of Curious Scents in Berkeley, California, for example, or the Mob Museum in Las Vegas. A lot of travel. But he did not get a big advance, despite the fact that his previous publication, The World's Greatest Bookstores, was a New York Times bestseller. Bob was not deterred. If finishing the museum book meant crashing on friends' couches, so be it. Here's more of our interview with Bob Eckstein. Well, the illustrations in the book, which you did, are very nice as well, but you are also a cartoonist, and cartoonists do kind of have a little bit different view of life at times. But this book was really a labor of love, so let me just talk about that for just a minute. From what I understand, it wasn't like you got a big advance to compile the book, and you even had to couch surf at certain points in time. So what moved you? What motivated you to just keep going?
It starts slowly. It starts something like when I did my first book was The History of the Snowman. I wasn't really sure what to write about. I knew that I loved Sherlock Holmes. I knew I wanted to do something that was going to be a mystery, but I didn't want it to be about crime. I wanted it to be about a mystery of life. It doesn't have to be grand. It could be small, like who told the first joke? Who made the first sandwich? Who made the first snowman?
Which is a melting piece of art, I might add.
Right. And my contention was that it's an important piece of folk art and one that is maybe of one of the earliest activities that we actually share with our ancestors. Now, that book began with me going to experts. I would go to the world's leading experts, people like Nigel Spivey, who's one of the top archaeologists, or people who are the top people in art history and cultural history. And I went to Europe and I went and sat down. But at that moment, I wasn't necessarily excited about the project. I first had to get the facts and start learning that there was a great history, that there was these skeletons in the closet, and there was a history in the Middle Ages that contained sex and violence with the snowman. And from that's the exact same pattern that happened with the museum book. As I go to museums, I start to reconnect with them. I start realizing how important they are. I start talking with people and hearing the stories of how their lives were changed by museums. And then, like a big snowball going down a hill, I became as excited as I am today with you. I love talking to you about this because it means a lot to me. I'm emotionally invested in this thing that before I took for granted.
Well, you also did produce a book about cartoons and cartoonists. We haven't talked much about your cartoons, which I do find extremely funny. One of them, you say, went viral, and that was the man with the walker standing outside of the garage full of, well, junk, saying to the man next to him, "Son, one day this will all be yours." I mean, I just thought that was hysterical and really hit the mark. Tell me about your career as a cartoonist. When did you know you wanted to draw cartoons?
It was just a dare. I was doing my books. I did my history of the snowman, and I needed an intermission. I had so much academic stuff in the book that I knew I needed a commercial break in the middle. And the world's greatest snowman cartoons was the answer. And I went to the world's greatest cartoonists. What I did was I reached out to the New Yorker and I asked them what I could purchase and put in my book. And then I became friends with some of these cartoonists. And at one point, I became good friends with Sam Gross, who was the best cartoonist, the funniest cartoonist in the world. Well, over the years, we became close friends. He recently passed away, but when he passed away, by that time, we were best friends. He had taken me out for my birthday to the famous New Yorker lunch, the weekly lunch that they have. And that's the same lunch that we have noted from great writers from back in the day of the 20s and the 30s. They continued to do this famous lunch. I was invited for my birthday. I enjoyed the food. I liked the company. I asked if I could come back next week. They said, sure, but come back with 10 cartoons. And they said, try to submit a batch of cartoons. That's what they call a batch, is a group of like 10 cartoons. And I went in the next time. I was new, and they did purchase the first cartoon I drew. And from there, it opened up a whole other world that I didn't know existed with cartoons. I studied, I soaked in as much I could about the subject, reading all the different cartoon books and going back to all the old New Yorker magazines. I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was, because I assumed that everyone who went in to pitch their cartoon sold a cartoon. I didn't realize it was hundreds of people submitting at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you're from New York, but you grew up on Long Island. And I think at some point in time, you must have realized that you had kind of a skewered view, like many cartoonists do, of the world, that there were just funny things in everyday life. So is that fair to say?
It is. I mean, I grew up briefly in the South Bronx, and I grew up in the projects. We were very poor before I moved to junior high school in Long Island. But during that time, I was always trying to maybe entertain my family. That was my first try at stand-up, was the dinner table. And it was a very tough audience.
Yeah.
They did not laugh easily at anything I had to say. They wanted me off the stage. And I would say I ended my stand-up career around the age of 15. But I did continue to write humor. I tried to write actually for my school paper in high school. I tried to write for the school paper in college, where I went to Pratt Institute. And I could not get in. I could not get anything accepted. And this is a great story for people who might listen to this and be interested in doing something like writing and getting discouraged. I had sent my work to my cousin, who was a writer, and he told me to not try it because he thought from what I sent him that I had no talent.
Wow. And you persevered.
Yeah, I did. And while I was at Pratt Institute getting rejected by the school paper, I had begun writing for newspapers and magazines. And I had begun writing for places like Spy Magazine, eventually Mad Magazine, and then the New York Times and New York Newsday. And I was getting published a lot. I had columns. I had a column for the Village Voice. And it's because I was moving forward. I accepted the rejection initially. And I also just believed that I had something that I could do. So when you said, where does my world fit in comedy-wise? It began first on the paper, just writing. And I didn't think in terms of doing a cartoon. It just simply wasn't something that I had much awareness. I did enter the contest once, the caption contest. And even then, I wasn't excited for whatever reason. I was a finalist, and I only played it once. But again, I was taking it for granted. I didn't really understand the gravitas of the New Yorker. In my world was, at that time, newspapers, the New York Daily News, Mad Magazine, and it wasn't later until I was totally romanced by the New Yorker. And it really is like a girlfriend who, right now, I cannot get her number. She will not return my calls. I went from a shooting star at the New Yorker, getting published hundreds of times. I mean, I sold over 50 cartoons, and I've done written pieces for them. And now it's very difficult because everything has changed. And like so much, everyone has moved on. And the people I worked for there, as well as all these other places like the New York Times, everyone's different.
Well, you said that you felt a need to keep going, even though you were rejected by Pratt, for example. What drove you to do that? I mean, how did you even make a living?
It's a complicated question because there's so many other balls in the air. For instance, I graduated Pratt Institute, and when I graduated, they asked me to be on the faculty. So I began teaching immediately. I had become a very popular illustrator. I had been writing columns, and as a matter of fact, I only could see now, looking back, how lucky I was. While there was getting rejection from the school paper, I was in the New York Times when I was a teenager, and I was making more money then. If you calculate the cost of living now, I did better as a student than I do today. Everything today is very difficult. Publishing does not give the advances, and the money is not there like it used to be. My first book, I made more money from. The advance was bigger than anything I've done since. I was paid more for appearing in the New York Times than I do now. It's a struggle, and I totally understand why. The internet has made it very difficult for print publications, and even teaching jobs don't pay as much as I made when I first began. But I struggled. I cobbled together a career by combining things such as teaching then at SVA.
The School of Visual Arts.
Thank you. Right. I'm assuming everyone knows these hip little abbreviations.
They're not all from New York. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, you do that also because you love teaching. And I did teach at Yonsei University in South Korea. And those are done because you get paid, but you're doing it because you feel flattered. It's an honor. You know you could possibly make a difference, and you're doing what you think is the right thing. And then you cobble together other things.
If you like this podcast, visit HarmonyTALKpodcast.com to hear more inspiring and entertaining stories from real-life authors, entrepreneurs, artists, inventors, and more. People like Bob Eckstein, who realized their dreams, overcame obstacles, avoided many distractions, and kept their eyes on the goal. HarmonyTALKpodcast.com. Let's get back to Bob. There's a story about you that I heard or read somewhere that when you were young, you worked on a golf course. You were telling jokes to some of the golfers, and the people who ran the golf course thought you were on drugs. And you decided right then and there you were not going to have a regular job, a regular life. You were going to do what you wanted to do. Does that ring true?
It does ring true. Lisa, you're bringing back bad memories. You're going to send me back to therapy.
Bad memories? That should be a good memory.
No, it was a bad memory. I'll tell you why. I'm watching The Boss, and there's one guy, and people warn me he's a tough boss. It's my first day on the job. It's 5:30 a.m. All these nutty golfers are coming out that early in the morning to get a starting time. It's around 6 a.m. maybe. I was already on the job for 30 minutes. I lasted. When the boss came racing down in a golf cart and in front of a large group of people embarrassed me, accusing me of being on drugs and that they don't tolerate that at the club, my kind.
Because you were making people laugh?
Well, he thought something was up, that I was making people laugh. You know, I was making jokes. I was conversing. I was being friendly. You know, God, I'm blessed with these charms.
Yeah, but it was a turning point, as I understand it.
Yeah, and I did say, I thought to myself then, I am not going to work for someone if I can help it. I am not going to be beholden to someone who treats people so poorly. This was totally inappropriate behavior on his part. I was mature enough, even at that age, to realize that that is totally uncalled for. And I was determined. I used that as motivation and fuel to say, I am going to try this freelance thing. I'm going to do the things I love doing. And I was a freelance illustrator then. I continued to do freelance writing. And instead of writing about things that I really didn't believe in or writing things that weren't deep in my heart, I stuck to my guns and said, I'm going to talk in my own voice. I'm not going to say I'm the smartest person in the room or that I'm a real writer. I didn't go to school for writing. But if I just tell my stories in my own voice, I think there could be people there who would enjoy that. And I can make a difference in that way.
Is this when we should talk about the cat book?
We could never talk about the cat book. It's like Fight Club. Never talk about the cat book. The cat book, I just want to sum up quickly. It's a fun book, and it's another example of doing something for a specific reason that's not monetary. That book was done because during COVID, all my friends, it seemed like everyone had a cat. I don't have a cat, but everyone had a cat. And I decided of a way of bringing people in a fun activity. So I emailed everyone and said, tell me your favorite cat names. Let's put together a book. And I was going to make a book that made them laugh. And that's really what that book is about. It reaches to a certain demographics who love cats and let them have a book that's just a good laugh.
Did somebody really name their cat Dr. Fauci?
Yes. Now, there's maybe a couple of names that I took creative liberty with and came up with the name myself, like James Spader for a Hollywood cat. I think I called the cat James Spaded.
James Spaded. But you're not done with cats, are you? I hear you're thinking about a cat cookbook.
I'm never done with cats.
And you don't have a cat.
I'm allergic to cats, but I love cats because I do see how people get so motivated. It led me to the idea that writers, sometimes they use their cat as a muse, and it inspires their writing. So I decided to do a book about that.
So you spoke about the pandemic, and you were really kind of inspired during the pandemic. You had a lot of pandemic cartoons. You had Pandemic Jeopardy, which I thought was pretty funny. And why don't you just talk for a second about the pandemic and being locked in your house?
Well, for me, it's always about how do we solve this problem? Everything's a puzzle. How do we resolve this conflict and how do we make the best of it? How can we turn it around and turn the tables? With the Snowman book, it was Batman, the movie, that inspired me because that movie takes a campy TV show and it turned the tables. So how do I turn the tables as a snowman and make it a compelling story that does have very serious consequences and a message? So this was with everything.
You actually wrote 2 books on the snowman.
That's because the first book, I was limited to how much I could spend. The second book, I spared no expense and made a beautiful, lush collection of gorgeous artwork that goes along with the story. And I think that's a beautiful coffee table book.
It is, and I have it. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you. I'm very proud of it. But you mentioned what did I do during COVID? It's about taking whatever's happening. It could be the election. It could be the fact that all of us are going through this horrific experience. But what do we do with our parents' property and all the stuff they've collected as hoarders? And that's why that cartoon that you mentioned earlier connects, because we are going through it together.
That's right. Thank you so much, Bob. We've actually come to the end of the podcast, even though I would love for it to continue, and perhaps we can talk again when you publish your next cat book.
No, this has been so enjoyable, Lisa. I'm so glad to have met you, and this has been such fun. Thank you.
Same here, and I really enjoy your work. This has been a podcast brought to you by AM Sky, or a third-generation family insurance business started in 1920. I'm Lisa Champeau. Thanks, Bob, and talk to the rest of you the next time. We hope you enjoyed this podcast with Bob Eckstein. You can read more about him and his work at bobeckstein.com. Here's another popular cartoon of his, Moses on the Mountain, holding the 10 Commandments tablets in the air. Behold, he says, now lighter and thinner. Bob's work is available for purchase on most retail outlets. Thanks for listening, and be sure to visit HarmonyTALKpodcast.com for more inspiring stories.